Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really diving into Jane Austen's Emma, using those great excerpts you shared. We're looking closely at the social dynamics, what makes the characters tick, the relationships, trying to offer a bit of a shortcut to understanding its complexities, maybe even some surprises.
Exactly. And Emma is such a classic. It feels familiar, right? But we want to go deeper than just like the plot. We're aiming to uncover those nuanced observations, those thought-provoking bits you might miss on a first or even second read.
Okay, so let's start right after Miss Taylor marries Mr. Weston. Emma, who, pushed for this match.
Yeah, she was the matchmaker.
Right. She actually describes it as a black morning's work for herself. That feels a bit odd, doesn't it?
It really does. And it immediately tells you something crucial about Emma. Intellectually, sure, she wanted it, but emotionally, she's facing a pretty big loss.
16 years.
Exactly. 16 years where Miss Taylor was, more than just a governess. She was a constant friend, support system through thick and thin. And their relationship shifted, right, to this equal footing and perfect unreserve.
Which made the bond even stronger, I guess.
Absolutely. It shows a kind of dependence under Emma's confident surface. And Austen, I think, is subtly pointing out the limited options for women then. Even a good marriage could leave this huge gap.
That's a really good point about the limitations.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Knightley sees it totally differently. He suggests Miss Taylor's actually the gainer. Only one person to please now.
Right. A very pragmatic view.
And Emma just let it pass. What do you make of that? Just that little moment.
Well, it's small, but it's packed, isn't it? Knightley, who's often, Austen's kind of moral guide. He gives the practical take. Emma's silence, though. Maybe it suggests she kind of knows he might have a point, even if she doesn't like it. It also sets up their dynamic, right? His honesty, challenging her view of herself. Or maybe, just maybe, it's a tiny dig at how self-centered Emma's view of Miss Taylor's role was.
Ooh, interesting angle. And speaking of how Emma sees herself, she knows Knightley is the only one who ever told her of her faults. And she worries her father might suspect she's not being thought perfect by everybody. That really speaks to her standing in Highbury. Yeah.
Totally. She's got this privileged spot socially in her family. It's probably shielded her from, real feedback. Her worry isn't really about getting better, maybe. It's more about keeping up that perfect image, especially for her dad.
Right.
And Knightley's dry comment, that Miss Taylor used to have to please two people, implying Emma was the other one.
Yeah.
It just reinforces his role as that honest mirror she doesn't always want to look into.
Okay, so Miss Taylor's married off. And Emma's very next thought is finding a wife for her father, Mr. Woodhouse.
I know. It's quite the leap, isn't it? Straight from one wedding to planning the next in the same house.
It shows that tendency she has, doesn't it, to kind of manage everyone else's lives.
Oh, definitely. Her reasons, nobody in Highbury deserves him. He's comfortable. He looked like he wanted the same kind office done for him. At the wedding, it shows she's a bit controlling, maybe projecting her own ideas onto him. And this early focus on arranging other people's love lives, perhaps it hints at some insecurity about her own future, a need to exert influence because her own options are, limited.
And it doesn't take long before she zeroes in on Mr. Elton.
Yeah.
Described as a very pretty young man, to be sure, and a very good young man, sets up the next scheme.
Yep. But before we get fully into Elton, let's look at her influence over Harriet Smith and how dismissive she is of Mr. Martin.
Right. She encourages Harriet to talk about him while secretly thinking he's completely wrong for her.
Exactly. She sees Harriet as someone she can mold, like a project. She guides the conversation about Mr. Martin, not because she cares about the match, but really to gather reasons against it. It shows Emma interfering based purely on her own social prejudices, which, reflects that rigid social ladder of the time. Small differences in background mattered a lot.
And poor Harriet, she's so innocent about it. She lists all these genuinely lovely things about Mr. Martin, his good mood, his kindness.
Yeah.
Going miles just for walnuts.
Yeah. Bringing the shepherd's son to sing. She thinks he's clever, successful with his farm, his family loves him.
Right. And she even shares Mrs. Martin's comment about him being a good son, meaning he'd be a good husband. And Harriet blushes. He sounds, honestly, like a decent guy.
He really does. Harriet's view is sincere. It's grounded in real qualities. That blush tells you everything about her feelings starting to grow. It gives us, and you listening, a clear picture of Mr. Martin's worth seen through Harriet's eyes.
But Emma's internal reaction is the total opposite. She thinks he's a completely gross, vulgar farmer, totally inattentive to appearances and thinking of nothing but profit and loss. Wow, that's incredibly harsh. Snobbish, frankly.
It's a huge contrast, isn't it? And it just lays bare Emma's deep-seated snobbery, her obsession with how things look, with social standing, dismissing him because he's not into books, even while admitting he'll probably do well financially. It shows how narrow her criteria are for judging people.
And then Harriet's simple response, it's almost heartbreaking. After Emma dismisses him, Harriet just says, "I wonder he did not remember the book."
So telling.
It's such a small thing, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About their connection, maybe a little disappointment that he forgot a shared moment.
Exactly. Harriet focuses on that forgotten book, a personal moment that meant something to her. A connection Emma just steamrolls over as unimportant. It's a really poignant reminder of the emotional damage Emma's causing with her social games.
This leads into that really interesting bit with Mr. Knightley about beauty versus mind. Emma's worrying about Harriet's present comfort, says she can't regret the acquaintance. And Knightley playfully switches it, saying he'd rather talk about Emma's looks than her mind. And then he just gushes pretty, to say beautiful rather. Can you imagine anything nearer perfect beauty than Emma altogether? Face and figure. He really lays it on thick.
It's a key moment. Firstly, yeah, it shows Knightley's deep, maybe often hidden affection for Emma. His detailed praise, the hazel eyes, features, skin, figure, even comparing her to Italian art. It's intense. It suggests feelings he's perhaps finding hard to keep under wraps.
He does try to soften it, saying he's biased as an old friend, but yeah, the enthusiasm is pretty obvious. What do you think sparks that outburst right then?
Well, I think it points to an admiration that's way beyond just friendship. He criticizes her actions a lot, sure, but underneath, his affection for her as a person is clear. And maybe it's also a subtle contrast. You know, Emma's judging people based on shallow social stuff, while Knightley's appreciation for her clearly goes much deeper.
Okay, let's shift to Mr. Elton and his eagerness. Isabella needs something done in London, can't travel.
Right. The fog and Mr. Woodhouse's worries.
And Elton immediately jumps in, offering to ride to London, saying it would give him infinite pleasure to help. But Emma's reaction is really strong. He was too good. She could not endure the thought. She would not give him such trouble. Why shut him down so firmly?
Well, outwardly it sounds polite, right? But Emma's reaction comes from her realizing Elton's interest is aimed at her. And she does not like that idea one bit. She reads his eagerness as trying to impress her, not just being helpful to the family. Her dramatic tone just highlights how uncomfortable she is with his attention.
Now, Emma justifies breaking up Harriet and Mr. Martin by saying she approves now that Harriet is completely decided against him. But her reasoning feels, well, pretty selfish. She says she'd have grieved to lose Harriet's friendship, and then says straight out, "I could not have visited Mrs. Robert Martin of Abbey Mill Farm. Now I am secure of you forever." And Harriet's just shocked. "You could not have visited me."
Yeah, that's a really raw moment. It totally exposes Emma's snobbery and how self-centered she's being. Her main worry isn't Harriet's happiness at all. It's about keeping her own social circle intact, keeping Harriet under her influence. And Harriet's shock, it just highlights that power imbalance and how fake Emma's concern really was. So early on, you see this pattern, Emma trying to shape lives, which, as we know, causes a lot of problems later.
Let's pivot to Mr. Woodhouse. His anxieties, his routines, endearing, but probably a bit tricky to live with sometimes.
Definitely.
He doesn't like walking far, always worried about drafts, people being comfortable, and that constant fit. "Well, my dears, how did your book go on? Have you got anything fresh?"
Austen draws him beautifully, doesn't she? This picture of gentle worry and a real resistance to anything changing. That question about the book, it becomes this familiar rhythm, showing his need for routine, for simple things, his focus on comfort. Yeah, it's sometimes over the top, but it comes from a genuinely kind place.
Yeah, Emma and Harriet even make up that charade for him, supposedly from a fairy.
Yeah.
He loves it, especially the flattering ending, reads slowly with explanations. It's actually quite touching how they indulge him.
It is. It shows their affection for him, their willingness to play along with his little eccentricities, and his enjoyment of something simple, something clear. Tells you a lot about his preference for the familiar.
We also get those sweet family bits from Mr. Woodhouse about Isabella's kids, Henry named after him, John after his father. But he thinks their dad, John Knightley, is too rough with them very often. And Emma smooths it over so diplomatically. "He appears rough to you because you are so very gentle yourself."
That exchange captures the different personalities perfectly, doesn't it? Mr. Woodhouse's extreme gentleness makes John Knightley's more direct style seem harsh. Emma's reply is just masterful, bridging that gap, showing affection for both her father and her brother-in-law.
Okay, after the charade, Mr. Elton tries to talk to Emma about it.
Yeah, he's trying to connect.
But she shuts him down, politely but firmly, returns the paper, says she's copied it into Miss Smith's collection, hopes his friend won't mind the first bit being transcribed, and Elton looks rather foolish. What's the subtext there?
Emma's basically putting distance between them, isn't she? Killing any idea that the charade was something special between them. By making it just an item for Harriet's scrapbook, she's deflecting his romantic hints. Elton's awkwardness shows he gets the message, understands the snub, and is probably confused by her change in attitude.
Now, Emma's really strong opinions on being unmarried, especially being poor. She says if she were ever like Miss Bates, so silly, so satisfied, so smiling, so prosing, she'd marry instantly. Very. She sees no similarity except being single and draws this line between a poor old maid and a single woman with money, saying poverty makes being single contemptible. Though she does soften it a bit for Miss Bates because of her good nature. These are sharp judgments.
They really are, and they reflect the harsh realities for women back then, economically and socially. Emma's distinction shows how vulnerable unmarried women were. Money meant status, respectability. Her view, even with the Miss Bates exception, underlines how society judged women for being poor and unmarried.
Then there's that calculated moment where she fakes the bootlace problem, breaks it, throws it away.
Very deliberate.
And makes Mr. Knightley stop, claiming she can't walk home, clearly trying to push Harriet and Mr. Knightley together.
Yeah, her matchmaking gears are grinding again, aren't they? Shifting focus now to Harriet and Knightley, breaking the lace, pretending to be stuck, it shows how manipulative she can be, even when she probably thinks she's helping Harriet.
We get a good description of Mr. John Knightley, too. Sense and information, but reserved manners can be out of humor.
Not ill-tempered, the text says, but his temper isn't his strong suit. Maybe made worse by his worshipping wife, Isabella.
Possibly. He's smart, quick, but can be blunt, ungracious, say something severe. Emma's not his biggest fan. It's a pretty rounded picture.
It is. Austen gives us the good and the, well, less good. His reserve and occasional bluntness definitely clash with the more openly affectionate people around him, like Emma. And Emma probably doesn't like him much because he sometimes criticizes her and has that practical view that bumps up against her more romantic ideas.
It's nice, though, that the Westons visit Hartfield so often. It helps the Woodhouses miss Miss Taylor less. Even John Knightley approves, says, just as it should be, and just as I hoped it was. Shows a nice community feel.
Yeah, it highlights how important those social ties were, that support network in Highbury. The Westons showing up regularly gives real comfort, eases that big change after Miss Taylor left. John Knightley liking it underlines that sense of community, that he's happy with how things settled.
But interestingly, Frank Churchill, Mr. Weston's son, still hasn't shown up since the wedding, even though people expected him.
The mystery man.
Mr. Woodhouse mentions Frank sent a proper handsome letter to Mrs. Weston, but then wonders whose idea it was, thinking Frank's too young. Emma has to remind him, my dear papa, he is 23. You forget how time passes. There's definitely some anticipation, maybe impatience about him, right?
Absolutely. A real sense of expectation, maybe a bit of disappointment he hasn't come yet. Mr. Woodhouse seeing him as a boy versus Emma, knowing he's a grown man, it sets the stage for his arrival, all the buzz around him.
Then we see Mr. Woodhouse with Isabella and the grandkids. Warm greetings, worries about her journey, suggesting gruel for everyone.
Classic Mr. Woodhouse.
Contrasting London air with Hartfield air. Isabella gently reassures him, mentions the doctor said they were fine, and notices Mr. Knightley's looking well. It's just a slice of their normal family life.
It is. You see the established patterns, Mr. Woodhouse's constant health worries, Isabella's patience, her own concern for Knightley shows the affection and how connected they all are.
John Knightley, though, gets prickly when asked about taking the family to the seaside.
Yeah, he bristles a bit.
Asserts his own judgment is just as good as Mr. Perry's, makes that sarcastic crack about Perry advising on travel costs. He really doesn't like being questioned.
No, that sharp reply shows he hates feeling interfered with, even if it's well-meant family concern. The sarcasm underlines his independence, his resistance to being told what to do.
And Isabella, Mrs. John Knightley, her usual response to Mr. Woodhouse is, very true, my love. But when he complains about her travel plans, she just goes silent. Doesn't agree, doesn't argue. Interesting tactic.
It is, isn't it? A clever way to handle him. Avoids a direct clash, avoids conflict. That non-committal agreement followed by silence lets her stick to her plans while still seeming respectful of her father's worries.
Mr. Weston then shares his own worries about Frank Churchill's visit. He's not sure he'll come, fears delays from the Churchills, suspects they're jealous.
Jealous of Frank's affection for his dad.
He wishes he wasn't so optimistic. But Emma confidently says he ought to come. Different levels of hope there.
Yeah, Mr. Weston's nervousness really points to that strained relationship between Frank and the Churchills. His pessimism versus Emma's hopefulness. Maybe her hope is fueled by wanting someone new and interesting around.
Then the snow arrives. Mr. Weston's happy he was wrong about the weather. But Mr. Elton makes those unkind remarks about Mr. Woodhouse being out in it, basically saying he just wanted to be proven right. Not very nice.
No, it shows a real lack of empathy, doesn't it? A bit petty, trying to make Mr. Woodhouse look foolish over something trivial. That insensitivity just makes him seem even less suitable for Emma, highlights his awkwardness.
Which leads right into Emma firmly rejecting Elton's advances. She spells it out. She only ever saw him as interested in Harriet, could never see him romantically, and his behavior might have misled Harriet. Ouch.
And she adds she has no thoughts of matrimony at present.
Right. And Elton is left angry and speechless. Emma definitely put an end to that idea.
Absolutely. Direct, clear rejection. No room for doubt. She defines the boundary, dismisses his intentions, his speechless anger, pure wounded pride, realizing he completely misread her signals about Harriet.
Emma's feelings about Frank Churchill seem to be shifting, though. First, she was maybe hyping his visit up to please Mr. Weston.
Yeah, playing it up a bit.
Now she's thinking about his impact on Highbury, even arguing with Mr. Knightley about him, taking the opposite view to her own real opinion. Suggests she's getting more interested, doesn't it?
I think so. Her view's evolving. She's curious, maybe a little attracted. Debating Knightley, even against her own feelings, suggests a kind of playful engagement, a growing awareness of Frank as this significant, intriguing person arriving on the scene.
Mr. Knightley, though, is pretty critical of Frank neglecting his father. He says, okay, judging without knowing everything is unfair, but Frank has a duty.
A clear duty.
Achievable through vigor and resolution, not playing games. He even suggests Frank should just tell Mrs. Churchill straight up that his father comes first. Very principled.
Knightley's viewpoint really shows his strong sense of duty, his straightforward morals. He thinks Frank's obligation to his father outweighs any social games or Mrs. Churchill's fussing. His idea of a direct message emphasizes honesty, responsibility reflecting his own values.
So very different expectations about Frank Churchill. Emma expects him to charm everyone, make a splash.
Right, based on looks and agreeableness.
Knightley's dismissive, sees him as superficial, doubts he has much substance. It's that clash against social appeal versus real character.
Exactly. Emma's more taken by the surface charm. Knightley looks for integrity, substance. His skepticism about Frank definitely hints at potential problems down the line, shows his sharper judgment.
Then Miss Bates arrives, with her very detailed, repeated story about Jane Fairfax's letter. Reads it twice for her mother.
Who's hard of hearing.
Miss Bates even notes her mother always hears Jane better. You can really feel the anticipation building for Jane's arrival.
Oh, definitely. Miss Bates's chatty, meticulous reading paints such a picture of her character and the close bond with her niece and mother. The repetition, yeah, it emphasizes her well-meaning but slightly wearing nature and sets up a contrast with Jane Fairfax, who's much more reserved.
Emma's view of Jane Fairfax also seems quite changeable. She admired her beauty at first, but those charming feelings didn't last.
No, the old prejudices creep back in.
Finds Miss Bates tiresome, thinks Jane's politeness is suspiciously cold, reserved. Even sees Jane's piano playing as showing off, basically. It feels critical, maybe a bit insecure.
I think so. Emma's fluctuating opinions about Jane reveal her own insecurities, her tendency to judge through her own biases, her social position. The admiration sours into resentment, probably fueled by feeling some social competition, being suspicious of Jane's quietness. Seeing Jane's talent as just showing off highlights Emma's own competitive streak, her inability to appreciate Jane's skills without suspicion.
At a dinner party, Mr. Woodhouse makes his quiet remarks, nice evening, fires a bit much, positive thoughts on Miss Bates and Jane Fairfax.
Yeah, simple, kind observations.
He even gives Jane that gentle compliment about having Emma's company. Sweet and unassuming.
It is. Mr. Woodhouse's gentle view is a nice contrast to Emma's more critical takes. His simple enjoyment, his kind words for both women show his good nature, his lack of prejudice. Complimenting Jane for having Emma's company, and maybe vice versa, suggests he hopes they'll get along.
Then the big news, Mr. Elton's engagement. Delivered excitedly by Miss Bates, letter in hand.
Of course, the town crier.
She gives the whole story of getting the news. Mr. Woodhouse offering pork. Miss Bates is thrilled. Her mother adds compliments. It's a major event, even from afar.
Miss Bates's enthusiastic delivery just captures that social buzz perfectly, doesn't it? The excitement around Elton's surprise engagement. Her detailed story, Mrs. Bates's comments, it paints Highbury's close community, how interested they are in each other. And Mr. Woodhouse offering pork, well, that's just him. Adds his touch of gentle oddness.
Mr. Woodhouse, though, has reservations. Thinks Elton's very young to settle. Shouldn't rush. He remembers enjoying his company when he was single. Classic Mr. Woodhouse worrying about change.
Exactly. It reflects his dislike of change, his sentimental attachment to how things were. Thinking Elton's too young fits with his protective side, his fondness for the old social setup in Highbury.
Miss Bates then dives into speculating about Miss Hawkins, the bride-to-be, and the vicarage. Delighted about a new mistress there, describes Miss Hawkins, shares stories of Elton's kindness to her mother.
Throws in comments about Colonel Campbell's deafness, Mr. Dixon.
Right, and concludes, Highbury has excellent society. It's peak Miss Bates, full of tangents, optimism.
Her rambling gives you so much social detail, though, and her enthusiastic viewpoint. Her observations, even if they wander, show you the community's values, her own positive outlook. Her excitement about Miss Hawkins highlights how important those social roles were in their small world.
Emma, meanwhile, is feeling regret about Harriet and Mr. Martin, especially after hearing the Martins only visited Harriet briefly.
The guilt is setting in.
But even with that conflict, she clings to the idea she did the right thing because of social class, even though it cost pain. She needs consolation. Heads to Randall's. This feels like a real shift in her, maybe starting to see the consequences.
It's a huge step towards self-awareness, I think. That short visit forces her to confront the hurt she might have caused Harriet. Okay, she still rationalizes based on status, but needing consolation. That shows she's uneasy, recognizing the human cost of her meddling.
At Randall's, Mrs. Weston mentions Frank seems lost for words when Emma talks about Jane's situation. And Emma claims she just forgot Jane's circumstances. Seems a bit convenient, maybe deliberate avoidance.
Possibly. Emma forgetting, Frank being awkward, it hints there might be something going on between them, some understanding Emma's either choosing to ignore consciously or not. Adds a little layer of mystery to how they interact, suggests there's more happening than Emma sees.
Then the Coles invite Emma and Mr. Woodhouse to dinner. He's reluctant, naturally. But Emma manages his worries. And the Coles are thoughtful, offering to wait for a folding screen to block drafts. That seals the deal, at least for Emma to go. Shows the social juggling in Highbury.
It really does. That delicate dance needed to handle Mr. Woodhouse's worries while still having a social life. The Coles being considerate shows how important that was in the community. And Emma's skillful handling highlights her role daughter, but also social negotiator.
Miss Bates is over the moon about the dinner invitation. Sees it as a mark of distinction, thrilled about seeing the Eltons. Her enthusiasm is infectious, as usual, and shows how much these events mean.
Absolutely. Her huge gratitude underlines the social weight of these invitations in Highbury and her own genuine love of socializing. Looking forward to seeing the Eltons just highlights the community's focus on the newlyweds and the ongoing social scene.
Mrs. Cole then mentions regretting that Jane Fairfax, who's such a great musician, doesn't have a piano, especially since they have a new grand piano they don't really use much.
Right, she feels a bit awkward about it.
Says they bought it, hoping neighbors like Jane might play it. Seems genuinely kind.
It does. Mrs. Cole shows real kindness, recognizes Jane's talent, even if she maybe doesn't grasp how talented Jane is. Feeling awkward about their own underused piano emphasizes that generous wish to share with someone who'd truly appreciate it.
Which leads to Emma's elaborate theories about who sent the piano. First suspects Colonel Campbell, then convinces herself it must be Mr. Dixon. Mrs. Weston kind of goes along with it, shifting from paternal kindness to female friendship, finally landing on an offering of love. Emma really gets invested in building this romantic story.
Emma's theorizing shows her busy imagination, doesn't it? Her habit of spinning romantic tales from tiny clues. Focusing on Dixon fits with her earlier thoughts, her tendency to see romance everywhere. Mrs. Weston, going along with it, suggests she's willing to humor Emma's guesses, at least partly.
Then Mrs. Weston offers another idea. Maybe Mr. Knightley sent it. Notes his kindness, his quiet generosity.
An interesting thought.
Emma finds it amusing, but doesn't totally dismiss it. It's an intriguing possibility. Hints at Knightley's real character.
Yeah, Mrs. Weston's idea subtly plants the seed of Knightley's deep kindness, his ability to do good things without making a fuss. Emma being amused might be because she hasn't quite grasped Knightley's depth yet, or the possibility of his feelings for her.
At the Coles party, Jane's piano playing is clearly better than Emma's. Then Frank Churchill joins in, playing a second part to her song perfectly, followed by the usual compliments and denials about his talent. It feels like a moment of real connection between them through the music.
Definitely. It highlights Jane's superior talent and that subtle but clear connection between her and Frank through their shared musical skill. Frank jumping in so smoothly suggests a deeper understanding, a shared interest beyond just polite chat.
Harriet's busy buying things, wondering where to send them, when Miss Bates bursts in,
Typical Miss Bates timing.
interrupts them, launches into her own story. Just another everyday interruption in Highbury's small world.
Exactly. Miss Bates turning up reminds you how intertwined everyone's lives are. Her interruption, maybe annoying for Emma and Harriet, is just classic her well-meaning but sometimes overwhelming.
Frank Churchill compliments the piano sound, suggests Colonel Campbell's agent had good taste, maybe Campbell gave detailed instructions or wrote to the maker himself. Jane Fairfax says nothing. Her silence feels important later, doesn't it?
It really does. Frank's detailed comments, talking directly at Jane about it, and then her silence. It creates this subtle tension. Her not responding can mean she's uncomfortable, doesn't want attention, or maybe she knows more about the piano than she can say.
Mr. Knightley then cuts right through Miss Bates's rambling to ask specifically how Jane is doing after the assembly the night before. Very direct, very considerate.
Yes, Knightley's directness is such a contrast to the usual social fluff. His specific concern for Jane's health shows genuine regard, a willingness to bypass the chatter to check on her, highlights how observant and caring he is.
Mr. Woodhouse then voices his strong disapproval of dancing with open windows at Randall's. Thinks it's risky, remembers he and Miss Taylor always disliked it.
The fear of drafts.
Mr. Weston jokingly admits he sometimes opened a window himself without anyone noticing. Mr. Woodhouse is astonished. It's a funny little moment, showing their different attitudes.
It is. A bit of humor, but it also underlines Mr. Woodhouse's constant caution versus Mr. Weston's more relaxed, maybe slightly naughty approach. Weston's confession adds a nice, unexpected touch to his character.
Plans for the upcoming dance are moving ahead. Mr. Weston's enthusiastic, making sure Miss Bates and Jane will be there. Mrs. Weston's more practical, worrying about drafts in the passage.
Balancing enthusiasm and caution.
Everyone's coming, including Frank Churchill, who's staying longer now. Miss Bates declares it'll be a delightful dance. You can feel the excitement building.
Yeah, the dance prep shows how important these gatherings are in Highbury. The effort to include everyone. Frank staying longer just adds to the buzz, the potential for more social twists and turns in their little world.
Frank Churchill's departure is dictated by his aunt, and he agrees right away. He says he'll keep up with news through Mrs. Weston's letters, calls it the blessing of a female correspondent. Seems he values staying connected.
His quick agreement to leave when his aunt calls shows how much power she has over him, even after he extended his stay. And appreciating Mrs. Weston's letters, it suggests he wants to keep tabs on Highbury, maybe for reasons we don't know yet.
Enter Augusta Elton, bringing her usual snobbery. Dismisses the area's lack of attractions for the sort of parties you speak of.
Ugh. Yes.
Mr. Woodhouse counters with his deep love for home, stories of hating to leave Maple Grove. Mrs. Elton then contradicts herself, saying people should socialize properly, but makes an exception for Mr. Woodhouse's health. Her social climbing is so obvious.
It really is. Mrs. Elton's arrival throws these different views into sharp relief. Her condescending attitude shows her self-importance, wanting to seem above Highbury society. Mr. Woodhouse loving home just highlights the contrast even more.
Mrs. Elton then gets excited about starting a musical society in Highbury, wants to form a club with Emma, have weekly meetings, worries married women give up music, clearly wants to be the cultural leader.
Oh, absolutely. Pushing for the musical society is all about her taking charge, showing off her interests, and the comment about married women, maybe a subtle way of saying she intends to stay accomplished after marriage.
And then she makes that funny, maybe accidentally clever comment, speculates that Mr. Knightley denying being in love with Jane so strongly might actually mean he will fall for her. Kind of ironic, possibly foreshadowing.
It is amusing. Her accidental insight highlights how unpredictable feelings can be, how things might turn out unexpectedly. Her observation about Knightley's strong denial is humorous foreshadowing, even if she has no idea.
The social scene gets busy with parties for the new Mr. and Mrs. Elton. Their calendar fills up fast. Mrs. Elton makes dramatic comments about her busy new life. She's definitely making waves.
Yeah, the rush of parties shows their social ambition, Mrs. Elton's eagerness to be a big deal in Highbury. Her dramatic statements just emphasize her theatrical style, her need to be the center of things.
Jane Fairfax has that quiet moment reflecting on her situation versus Isabella's.
Mm.
Says the difference isn't age, it's circumstance. Isabella has family close, Jane likely won't.
It's poignant.
She thinks the need for connection, like going to the post office, will always pull her out, even in bad weather, until her feelings fade. It really shows her isolation, her longing.
Jane's reflection reveals how aware she is of her tricky spot, socially and emotionally. Comparing herself to Isabella highlights the stability Jane lacks. The post office comment powerfully illustrates her need for connection and that fear that her feelings might just die out without support.
John Knightley says something kind to Jane then. Clarifies his earlier comment about time changing her meant her situation changing. Hopes in 10 years she'll have as many close ties as he does. A moment of real empathy from him.
It is. John Knightley's thoughtful clarification shows genuine kindness, understanding of her isolation. His hope for her future reveals a more considerate side than we often see, suggests he gets the social nuances more than we might think.
Mr. Woodhouse praises everyone's handwriting. Anna, Isabella, Mrs. Weston. Then Emma struggles internally, trying to casually drop Frank Churchill's name into the conversation. Shows she's thinking about him a lot, maybe a bit self-conscious.
Definitely. Her internal effort highlights her growing interest in Frank and her awareness of how mentioning him might land. Trying to seem casual shows she's conscious of the social dynamics, wanting to see how others react.
Jane wants to spend time with the Campbells, asks Mrs. Elton not to inquire about governess jobs for her yet, but Mrs. Elton just barrels ahead, insisting on helping, ignoring Jane's wish to wait till summer. Mrs. Elton's pushiness is really something.
It is. That exchange shows the contrast perfectly. Jane's quiet wish for independence versus Mrs. Elton's meddling, self-important help. Jane wanting control over her own future clashes directly with Mrs. Elton needing to exert influence, show off her connections.
Mrs. Elton also fiercely defends her sister Selina as a fine lady, if anyone implies otherwise. Then gives a different, probably fake, opinion of Mrs. Churchill as a thorough fine lady. Her family pride and social climbing are clear.
Oh, yeah. Defending her sister shows her own insecurity, her obsession with rank. The contradictory opinions about Selina and Mrs. Churchill just highlight her desire to cozy up to perceived superiors, assert her own family's importance.
Mrs. Elton also shares stories about her courtship. Dr. Elton being impatient, despairing about carriages. She seems to enjoy telling these tales of his supposed drama and devotion.
It serves to make her seem more important, right? Portrays Elton as this dramatic, devoted suitor. These stories just reinforce her tendency to exaggerate, to make herself and her relationship the focus.
Emma, observing Frank Churchill, notes his popularity but wonders about the depth of his friendships, thinks he might be a bit vain. Decides general benevolence is better than general friendship. Her view of him is getting more critical, more complex.
It is. Emma's thoughts show she's looking beyond the surface now, noticing potential vanity, preferring kindness over just being friendly to everyone, suggests she's developing a better understanding of his character than just being charmed.
Mr. Knightley mentions he's keen to finally meet Mrs. Elton, having heard so much, but when they arrive, he realizes he hasn't actually met either of them and hangs back. A slightly awkward moment for him.
Yeah, his initial curiosity, then hesitation, shows he's a bit separate from these newer Highbury circles. Being reluctant to jump in reflects his reserved style, his sticking to social rules.
At the ball, Miss Bates is peak Miss Bates, apologizing profusely for maybe stepping on Emma's foot, gushing about Frank Churchill's politeness.
About her mother's glasses.
Rambling compliments, rapid-fire greetings, comments on the fire, ordering tea. She's totally in her element.
Absolutely. Her behavior is the perfect picture of her character. Well-meaning, talkative, maybe a bit oblivious. Her interactions are this constant background hum, showing her genuine appreciation for everything, even if it's a bit much sometimes.
During supper, Miss Bates delivers this incredible non-stop monologue. From the moment supper's called till she sits down.
It's amazing.
Worries about Jane's shawl, praises Frank's help, gives updates on her grandmother's evening with Mr. Woodhouse, notices Mrs. Elton's elegance, the room layout. It's a hilarious, vivid look inside her head.
It really is. That long monologue gives you this funny, insightful peek into her stream of consciousness. Her random mix of worries, observations, bits of info, it's like a tiny snapshot of all the social details filling her mind, showing her well-meaning but often wandering way of thinking.
And then that genuinely scary moment happens. Harriet gets harassed by a woman and a boy.
Yeah, quite unsettling.
Luckily, Mr. Knightley shows up right then, delayed because he forgot scissors he borrowed from Miss Bates, and steps in forcefully, scares them off, takes Harriet safely home. His timing is crucial. shows his protective side.
It's a really important moment. Knightley stepping in reveals his protective feelings, his deep care for Harriet, his quick action, his immediate concern for her safety. It underlines his basic kindness, his role as a sort of moral guardian in the community, defending someone vulnerable.
Back at Artfield, Harriet reveals her little treasures connected to Mr. Elton, the piece of court plaster he used. And even more precious, the end of an old pencil he threw away. She remembers exactly how she got it. These tiny things mean the world to her.
It's so poignant, isn't it? Her attachment to these seemingly worthless objects just shows the depth of her innocent crush, her romantic view of things. Remembering the pencil story in such detail highlights how much she valued even the smallest interaction with him, shows her vulnerability, her deep capacity for feeling.
Harriet then decides she has to destroy these keepsakes. Feels ashamed to have kept them after marrying someone else. Resolves to burn them, though Emma practically suggests the plaster could still be useful. It's a symbolic letting go.
It is. Destroying the mementos is a big step for Harriet, emotionally. Accepting Elton's marriage, deciding to move on, even though it hurts. Emma's practical comment about the plaster adds that touch of realism, highlights their different ways of dealing with sentimentality.
Mr. Knightley's suspicion of Frank Churchill grows stronger. He suspects double dealing regarding Frank and Emma. He watches Frank paying attention to Jane, thinks it's wrong for someone supposedly after Emma.
He sees things others miss.
Notices symptoms of intelligence, admiration between Frank and Jane. His distrust is really building now.
Yeah. Knightley's growing distrust comes from his sharp observation skills and his strong moral sense. He sees a mismatch between Frank's focus on Emma and how he acts with Jane, suspects something's hidden. Noticing that unspoken communication between them just confirms his good judgment of character.
And Knightley admits why he stayed out of the shade at Box Hill. He wanted a better view of Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax together. His suspicion made him actively investigate.
It shows how strong his suspicion was, right? And how proactive he is about finding the truth. Positioning himself deliberately to watch them underlines his protective feelings for Emma, his determination to figure out what's really going on.
The Box Hill trip itself, meant to be fun, turns sour when Emma makes that incredibly cruel remark to Miss Bates.
Awful moment.
Silences her, hurts her deeply, and Emma feels immediate, intense regret. A real low point for Emma's behavior.
It's pivotal. That cruel comment brutally exposes her arrogance, her capacity for thoughtless cruelty, but her instant, strong remorse. That shows she's developing self-awareness, recognizing the real harm her words can do.
Mrs. Elton then announces Jane Fairfax has got a governess job with Mrs. Smallridge, bragging she influenced the choice.
Of course she did, according to her.
Jane reacts with dignity but firmness, stating her own wishes, showing her distress. Mrs. Elton's meddling and self-importance are just relentless.
Yes, Mrs. Elton announcing it, boasting about it, just highlights her continued interference, her total lack of sensitivity to Jane's feelings. Jane's dignified but clear pushback underlined her independence, her quiet fight against Mrs. Elton trying to run her life.
Then, sudden news from Randalls. Mrs. Churchill has died unexpectedly.
Big shock.
Creates a mix of reactions in Highbury: seriousness, shock, speculation about Mr. Churchill, about Frank. But Emma's first thought, how this might help Frank. Maybe clear the path for him and Harriet. Her matchmaking brain is always working, even now.
It is. Mrs. Churchill's death is huge, ripples through Highbury. Emma immediately jumping to how it affects Frank's love life shows how stuck she is in that matchmaking mode, even when the news is serious.
Mr. Knightley approaches Emma, looking very serious. Asks for a private word, reassures her the news isn't about his family, awkwardly says he has something to break to her, corrects himself. His seriousness signals something big is coming.
Yeah, his serious look, that uncharacteristic stumble with words, it builds the tension, makes you feel apprehensive. And saying it's not about his family focuses the possibilities, sets up a reveal that's going to hit Emma directly.
And Knightley drops the bombshell. Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax have been secretly engaged all along, mostly because Mrs. Churchill hated the idea.
Wow, the big reveal.
The piano was from Frank. Jane taking the governess job was about needing independence. Knightley stresses the sacrifices Jane made. The secret's finally out.
And it just blows up all of Emma's assumptions, her whole understanding of everyone's relationships. The secret engagement explains all those little moments Knightley noticed, exposes how much Frank and Jane hid, driven by Mrs. Churchill's opposition.
Emma's reaction is shock, deep embarrassment, distress at her own blindness, her misjudgments. She finally sees Jane's real character, how unfair she's been, and feels terrible about pushing Harriet towards Frank. A painful but vital moment of clarity for her.
It's a massive moment of self-realization for Emma. She has to face the fallout from her own arrogance, her terrible judgment of both Frank and Jane. Her regret about misleading Harriet really drives home the depth of her mistake, and it paves the way for her own growth.
Mrs. Weston confirms it all, shares Frank's side of the story, his deep love for Jane, the massive problems Mrs. Churchill caused, Jane's strength and determination to be independent. It backs up Knightley and adds more context.
Right. Mrs. Weston's confirmation gives Frank's perspective, highlights the huge challenges they face because of Mrs. Churchill, and really underlines Jane's resilience, her determination to make her own way.
Emma gives Jane a truly sincere apology for how she acted, her unkind thoughts. And Jane accepts it graciously with understanding, a really important reconciliation.
Emma's apology shows genuine remorse, her willingness to own her mistakes. Jane accepting it so generously shows her own good character, her understanding of why Emma behaved as she did, flawed as it was.
Harriet's reaction to the news is surprise, but ultimately she accepts it, realizes Frank was probably just flirting generally.
She handles it well.
And then she drops her own bombshell, confessing she still has feelings for Mr. Knightley, based on his kindness to her. Harriet's romantic focus has definitely shifted.
It shows real emotional maturity from Harriet, doesn't it? Accepting the truth about Frank fairly calmly, realizing he was just flirting and then admitting feelings for Knightley. It introduces this completely unexpected romantic twist, shows her capacity for real affection, her good heart.
And then, the moment we've all been waiting for. Mr. Knightley tells Emma he loves her and asks her to marry him. Emma's overjoyed, accepts immediately, the culmination of their whole complicated journey.
It feels like the natural end point, doesn't it? All that deep affection, that mutual respect that's been growing between them throughout the whole story. His heartfelt proposal, her happy acceptance, it resolves their own complex path towards finally understanding and valuing each other.
Frank's letter arrives, filling in more details about the engagement, how they got close at Weymouth, the stress of the secret because of Mrs. Churchill, his reasons for misleading Emma and others, gives a fuller picture of their secret romance.
Yeah, Frank's letter gives his side a more detailed story of their growing feelings and the huge difficulties they faced. It also sheds light on why he misled people, gives a more complex view of his actions, even if they weren't exactly honorable.
Emma and Mr. Knightley talk it all through. Knightley critiques Frank's letter, admits Frank did wrong, but also points out some unfairness in Frank's excuses. Emma freely admits her own mistakes about both Frank and Jane. Their honesty shows how strong their own bond is becoming.
Their conversation really highlights their growing closeness, their ability to be honest, even self-critical. Knightley's sharp analysis of the letter, Emma readily admitting her errors, it shows they connect intellectually and emotionally. They're committed to being open with each other.
The Eltons react exactly as you'd expect. Mrs. Elton is outraged at being deceived, offers Emma sympathy, mostly about herself, of course.
Oh, natural.
Mr. Elton just quietly agrees. Their responses are perfectly in character, self-absorbed, worried about appearances.
Totally. The Eltons' reactions just underline their self-focus, their obsession with social standing. Mrs. Elton's fake sympathy, tinged with feeling personally wronged, and Elton's quiet agreement, it's exactly them.
Jane and Frank plan to marry soon, after a decent mourning period. Mr. Weston is ecstatic, finally getting the union he hoped for. Looks like a happy ending for them.
It does. It's a satisfying resolution for Frank and Jane after all their difficulties, sets them up for happiness, and fulfills Mr. Weston's biggest wish for his son.
Mr. Knightley gently prompts Emma to think about Harriet's feelings, the possibility of her being happy with Mr. Martin after all. Shows his thoughtfulness, his valuing real worth over social rank.
Yeah, Knightley's gentle suggestion shows he's still thinking of Harriet's well-being, and he believes in that potential match with Martin, despite Emma's earlier meddling.
And sure enough, Robert Martin comes back, proposes again, and Harriet happily accepts. Seems Emma's interference, ironically, might have helped Harriet recognize the better, more genuine match in the end.
It's a really heartwarming resolution for Harriet and Robert Martin, shows that real happiness comes from genuine feeling, shared values, regardless of Emma's earlier mistakes or social rules.
And finally, Emma and Mr. Knightley look forward to their life together at Donwell Abbey. Knightley reassures Emma she'll still be a good influence on Harriet. Their future looks bright, full of happiness and growth together.
Their engagement marks the end of their personal journeys of growth, their path to understanding and truly appreciating each other. Knightley reassuring her about Harriet underlines how much Emma has changed for the better and the strength of real friendship.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Emma, we've really picked apart that complex social world, the real dangers of judging wrongly, the nuances of all those relationships, all unfolding through surprising twists, and, importantly, the characters growing and learning about themselves.
What's just brilliant about Emma is how Austen uses those tiny details, those small observations, to show big truths about the characters, what drives them. It really, really rewards reading closely, doesn't it? You find new layers every time.
And even though Emma is definitely set in its time, those core themes, knowing yourself, the pressures of society, even the unspoken ones, that journey to understanding yourself and others, they still feel incredibly relevant today, don't you think?
Absolutely. Which brings us to a final thought for you listening. Thinking about Emma's journey, what are some modern versions of her schemes? Assumptions we might make about people based on, say, social media or first impressions that could lead us into simile misunderstandings. It's worth considering our own perceptions, maybe our own biases, and how we see the world around us.